Hello everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video I have the level 170 Selenopolis update tier list for PvP for y'all. I've done a lot of matches this update. I kind of have a good feel for the meta, and honestly I was pretty spot on with my predictions like last month, but I was wrong about a couple of things. So I'm going to format this video a little differently than my other ones. I'm going to basically list and talk about everything good on every school individually, and then depending on the meta right now, of course, I will talk about the matchups, and that will kind of, put it higher on the list or lower on the list. So let's start off with Storm. So Storm is probably in the best state it's ever been in my past 4 years of playing this game. Storm right now is honestly a really solid pick in the game right now. Now, the only thing I will say, if you do want to make a Storm and get into PvP, it does have a very big learning curve and a very high skill ceiling. A lot of people tend to make it out to be a very brain dead school, which it can be depending on the matchup. But generally, you're not going to really rank up on this school unless you know what you're doing and you understand pacing. The reason Storm is so good right now in the game is simply because of cards like Catch the Day, Storm Owl, Storm Elf as well. This is a very solid card, but not even just that. You have Catalan, which can be great situationally. Barry can be good as well to combo with Path B Owl and such, and obviously Zilla is pretty good. Even Triton and like Path B King Artorias to counter heals are pretty good, but that being said, if you do get someone who is just hell-bent on jading, these counters aren't gonna work, unfortunately. But Storm right now basically is in a spot where it can pretty much beat any matchup in the game, except for maybe Ice. I'd still argue you could probably beat a Death on a Storm if you pack the right cards and maybe you get a little lucky. But the only matchup that is like a clear shutout is the Ice versus Storm matchup. There's nothing you can do in that matchup. It's like the worst matchup in the game right now, and you'll just lose. Even being on my Ice, I've gotten my ass kicked by Storms so many times, but I still win because my school just dogs them. Another negative for Storm right now is the fact of the matter that they are years behind the 6 other schools in terms of dual schooling. Within this update, it's kind of amplified the problem and made it more clear, and the devs are aware that Storm's lack of dual school is a pretty big issue, but just combining the fact of the matter that the dual school isn't that great and the counter matchups are pretty good against Storm, and on top of that, everyone is setting for Storm, and when you set for Storm, historically, it's always been kind of lower, even though it is really good right now. I'm saying the fact of the matter is, if schools set for Storm, it isn't really quite up there in S tier with the other schools, because those schools you can set as hard as you want for them, but you still won't beat them no matter the matchup, right? So I'm gonna put Storm in like a high A tier. I do understand why people want to put it in S tier, but to me, the cons of the counter matchups being very punishing, you not being able to dual school, and everyone is set for you, is definitely going to take you down a tier to A, like A+, I would say. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about Life. Life is honestly insane this update. Life has 3 different strategies right now in the game. You can either A, Jade, and just win, or not rank down, which is what a lot of people do. Or B, you can do a cosplay PvE strat, which basically means you'll play like a Storm, Fire, or Myth on a Life, and all you'll do is buff every turn and one-shot the opponent, and they can't kill you because you use your Jading and your HP and your resist to not die to them. And option 3 is like regular Life, where you run like Goat Monk, a lot of Burrowing Banes, Spiny, Luminous, a lot of stuff. And Life right now is kind of an awkward one to rank, because I feel like everyone knows Life is the best school in the game right now, and including myself, I think it is the best school, definitely S tier, by the way. But it's just kind of weird to rank it, right? Because it's just, there's so many different strats you can do on this school, which I guess you could argue is a good thing, but I think for the devs trying to nerf Life is going to be a bit of a hassle, because all 3 of the strats are just insanely good right now. But I think a good place to start would be with nerfing Jading, because everyone seems to be pretty upset about that, and basically nobody can beat it right now in the game. Storm is the only school that can come close to beating it, but even then, a Jade who literally has their whole deck set to stall out a Storm like you can't beat them, right? You guys saw that live on my stream like last week. It was like a Marshall Warlord Jade, but literally 90% of their deck was set just for Storm, and I couldn't even touch them. So I think a good starting point would just be by nerfing Jading strats, and maybe that would indirectly nerf like the PvE strats as well. Maybe you can see what happens there. But yeah, life is just on its own level right now, so easily S tier. Okay, so next up, I want to talk about Myth. Now, Myth has been kind of hated by the community for quite some time, and the reason that is, basically, Myth is just a demon of a school. You have some of the best stats in the game. Myth Gen is just very easy to set up and one-shot people with. You kind of just PvE and buff stack, and people can't really do anything about it. On top of that, you can hit through weaknesses and nuke your opponent, or hit through shields and nuke your opponent. However, this update, I believe Myth actually got quite a lot worse. Now, you lost Shift, which is a big deal because the two schools that you are supposed to counter, which is Death and Ice, basically, they're just going to spam you with Poison and Frostbite now, and that's exactly what they're doing. That's why Ice and Death are doing really well right now in the meta, because Myth is struggling now that they don't have Shift, and Ices and Deaths are just fully abusing that right now in the game. But on top of that, Myth didn't really get any love this update, you know? I would say Myth just kind of stayed where it was last update, but the other schools all got like different spells and utilities to use against Myth. So it's not really that they nerfed Myth aside from Shift, it's more so they buffed the other schools and just kind of left Myth behind where it was. I would still recommend Myth for a new player because like anybody can kind of get like 1800 rank on a Myth. It's not really that hard. There's literally like a Myth spreadsheet out there on how to rank up. It's pretty easy to do. But in terms of like the top level of play, I don't think Myth is quite as good as it used to be. It's still a safe pick. It probably always will be until they touch cards like Mythgen, Stone, you know, Pigs drop there. But until then, I think Myth is honestly just going to be kind of mid, kind of in the B tier. So I'm going to put it in the B tier for that reason. Okay, next up, let's talk about Death. Now, Death actually got a lot better this update. It's been struggling ever since the Drain nerf, but Death actually got like giga buffed this update. Now, I said this actually in my prediction video, I believe, or whenever we heard that Shift got banned and stuff. I said Death was going to get a lot better, and the entire community thought I was absolutely crazy, which seems to be a reoccurring theme the past year. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, and then months later they figure out, wow, Liam was actually right the whole time, I just didn't see it. So the reason why Death got a lot better this update is simply because the new Fire Dragon spell, this thing just absolutely curb stomps any shield. It basically breaks off shields, hits with fire, and then gives you like a blade fuel back for death. Absolutely insane, busted card. But on top of that, poison and frostbite are obviously big problems in the game right now, right? And with Myth losing shift, basically as a death, now you can essentially just spam, you know, poison and all these other, you know, hit and blade cards that you got this update with like Anubis and just get away with it. And basically what I'm saying here is poison is super good against your counter matchups, and then you can just spam hit and blades against Myth to the point that Myth kind of struggles against death. Now I would say a good Myth who doesn't deck fill is going to beat a death still, but you can't really count death out anymore is my point. Like if you know what you're doing on a death, you can easily rank up right now in the game. Probably go as far to say that death is probably like B plus or like A minus right now in the game. If it didn't struggle a little bit against like life, because you know, just life being life, I think death would be honestly a really solid pick right now. Or even ice being as broken as it is right now in the game, I actually think I'm gonna have to put it down to B plus, I want to say, because I just think the fact that you struggle against life who you're supposed to counter, and then ice being super busted, I think it kind of puts death in an awkward spot. Death is still an amazing school this update, and you definitely are seeing a lot of death mains queue this update because of how good it is with the fire dual school and the Fire Dragon. Alright, next up, let's talk about ice. Now, this school has gotten giga buffed, and this school obviously was struggling for a little bit, but people weren't really understanding why ice was struggling. They were just saying ice was bad, which was kind of misleading, because it wasn't the fact that ice was ever bad, it's the fact that ice couldn't do well or thrive given the metas the past year. So now you're kind of seeing Ice catch up and get overly buffed within these past updates with cards like Winter Moon and the new Shoe spell, which is basically the value of a shadow enhanced spell. Absolutely insane card that needs to get nerfed. I'm not queuing my Storm personally until they nerf Ice or until the new season starts, because I am not dealing with this dumb school. It's absolutely busted right now. So on an Ice, you have the Blimp Pet, which has been objectively broken for years. I think 3 years now. You have Thieving Dragon, which is insane. You have Frostbite, which is insane. You have Scion, which is good. You have Elemental, which is good. You have Wyvern, which is good. Lord of Winter, not a bad card. Golem, pretty good. And yeah, I mean, it's just crazy good, the school. Basically, there's nothing you can do against it. You can't bubble. They have Blimp. You can't shield. They have Frostbite. You can't aura. They have Dragon. You can't blade. They have Wyvern. You can't negative aura them because the new Shoe spell is like the value of a shad. You can't hot or dot them because they're simply all this dual schooling storm right now, because if you do that, it's kind of hard to lose on an Ice. So the only things you're really weak against at that point is like shield gambits and traps, but nobody really trap stacks right now and nobody really wants to. Even if you want to though, on an Ice, you can run a build like I run where you can get perfect storm and fire accuracy pretty much and just not really lose any games. But off of the sheer fact that basically Ice can counter everything in the game, including its counter matchups, you can't really count this school out right now in the game, unfortunately. The only thing stopping from Ice being insanely busted right now is the fact that healing counters Ice when that's not supposed to be a thing. So yeah, I'm gonna have to put Ice right beside Life in the S tier. Again, really only going to struggle a little bit against your counter matchups, but even then it's a 50-50 if you're a good Ice player and you know what to do. And then obviously Jading is pretty busted, but like a normal Life with Storm dual school and you're playing well, you can beat them. It's just tough. Next up, let's talk about Fire. Now, I've heard a lot about Fire this update. I've heard it's really busted. I've heard it's really bad. Now, obviously this video is my opinion at the end of the day, right? But I think Fire is a good example of a good school that is actually designed pretty well, but Rochambeau and counter matchups just completely destroy the whole school and its identity. So for example, I think Fire is insanely good right now. Actually, you kind of just get shit on by Storm and Life because they just obviously diff you with their stats and they diff you with their counters, right? But in every other matchup in the game, you essentially can just OT into an Ifrit and just beat everybody. A lot of people want Sun Serpent to come back, which I think is a horrible idea in my opinion, because at that point, you're just gonna see people hop off the Storm and go immediately to Fire like they did a couple months ago or last year when they actually had Serpent in the game. So you could bring Serpent back to help fight against like Storm and Life, but then again, that's an identity crisis because why would you ever play Storm when you could just play Fire with Sun Owl pretty much? I think if Fire got Sun Serpent back, I'd probably put it in, honestly, maybe like the S tier, honestly, because you could really fight back against Storm and Life with Serpent just being in the game easily. But off of the fact that the counter matchups are queued quite a bit, which is just Life and Storm right now, I think I'm gonna have to put Fire probably right behind Death in the B tier. Definitely better than Myth right now in the current meta, I would say. Fire right now is kind of what Ice has been like the past year, right? Like it's a good school, but like just because of what's queued right now and what's been good for so long, you can't really see Fire thrive that well because the counter matchups are, you know, queued so often. Lastly, let's talk about the balance school. Now, this one's gonna be a little awkward, I want to say, and that's because a lot of balances don't really know what they're doing anymore. A lot of the balances I've faced have either been trying some like new gimmick strats or simply just banking on legacy spells to win. But right now, I think balance is in a pretty good spot, I want to say. I don't think it's like C or D tier. I don't think it's S tier like it was with Mana Burn in the game. The new Chameleon spell that you get from the new world is really cracked. You still have stuff like Sir Badger. You still have stuff like Chimera Path B. You know, Power Nova even is okay. Gearhead got buffed this update as well. You still have Lore Master Samurai, really good hit and mitigation, and Scales is still beyond broken. On top of that, your Balanced Scion is insanely overpowered right now, and you have Judgment, which is obviously above balanced damage per pip, which can be used at basically any pip cost. I think this update definitely allows for more skill expression for balances. I think a lot of the boosted people, a lot of the lower rank and middle rank people are going to struggle with balance this update, but I think if you know the meta, you know what you're doing as a high rank player, balance honestly could be like an A tier school right behind Storm. Right now, I'd honestly rank balance more so down into like the B tier, but over time, I think balance is probably just going to be right beside Storm, right there in the A tier, at least at the skill ceiling. If you're on a fire or a storm and you know what you're doing against a balance, and you know how to pace yourself with the new auras and play against the chameleon, you can honestly kind of just body balances. It's kind of insane. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. This is my tier list right now, and this is kind of what I've been seeing going on in the game. And you know, I hate to say I told you so, guys, but people are seeing with time that, wow, Liam was right the whole time. And it's kind of funny. I made like a meme about this a couple of weeks ago, but it's funny, dude. It's really funny. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts down there. Leave a like and sub if you made it this far. If not, that's okay. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye.